The following is produced by 5 Star Productions USA, which is solely responsible for its editorial content.
You're evil, pure
Your stupidity
evil.
makes us laugh.
Imagined voices, hallucinations, wild delusions turning your normal life into a living hell.
I hear voices 24 hours a day, even in my sleep.
Schizophrenia. It strikes young, promising adults and robs them of their prime. Meet the victims, the doctors, and the families on the front line, waging a daily battle against this devastating and bizarre mental illness. Today on Today's Health.
When Doug was 23 years old, his prospects couldn't have been brighter. And then it started. Doug became disinterested and paranoid. Voices and visions drove him over the edge. No, this isn't a tale from a supermarket tabloid. It's from a medical case study. And what's afflicted Doug is all too real: schizophrenia. Hello, I'm Kathleen Sullivan, and this is Today's Health. In this edition, we'll explore the complex mental illness that afflicts nearly 1 in 100 Americans: schizophrenia.
It's the most powerful weapon in the world, and every person on the planet has one with them every minute of every day. The human brain. Our mental abilities have allowed a physically inferior species to survive, thrive, and flourish. But what happens when the normal chemistry of the brain becomes imbalanced? That's when reality can go completely askew, and the brain can trigger an altered state that's often confusing, frightening, and completely distracting. Schizophrenia. It's a mental illness that results from a neurobiological disorder. It's a disease just like diabetes and muscular dystrophy, and appears to be caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's a condition which may be genetic, and it afflicts 2.5 million Americans. The annual price tag for medical treatment hovers in the area of about $30 billion. And for potential victims of this disease, it's a ticking time bomb that strikes men between the ages of 16 and 25, and women between the ages of 25 and 30. This tragic mental illness can afflict someone with a perfectly productive, normal life and turn it completely upside down. Let's first say what schizophrenia is not. It's not split personalities like Sybil or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The symptoms of schizophrenia include delusions, false beliefs, abnormal perceptions, and hallucinations. The victims see things and hear things that all seem very real to them.
It is a disease. It is a disease that we have begun to realize is a chemical abnormality. People will call it a chemical imbalance. It is something that people do not have a choice over. They don't bring it on themselves, and it is becoming more and more treatable as time goes on.
If medication can control the symptoms, psychotherapy and counseling can help the patient's family and friends put their lives back together. Delusions, hallucinations, and emotional withdrawal and other debilitating symptoms make schizophrenia a disease that afflicts one victim and affects everyone else in their life.
The symptoms are frightening, and the numbers are staggering. But to better understand this mental illness, you have to look beyond statistics and bizarre behaviors and meet the people who make up those numbers. Here's one now.
Jim is one of the 2.5 million Americans with schizophrenia, and he seems to be on his way back.
It started when I was 17, and just things got worse. My life started falling apart.
He progressed more and more, being withdrawn, until just before the end of his junior year, he walked away. He went to the Cleveland airport, I believe, and we didn't see him for, 2 years? Or hear from him.
I've been homeless on the street and on the road and so on and off for years.
Jim's absence from home, unexplained absence at that time from home, affected the family in many, many ways. I think it tore us apart. It tore us away from each other a great deal.
Your mind creates the worst imaginable scenario, and that's a problem. You begin to read the obituary type things where they've lost children, and what morgue is he going to be found in.
When Jim first came to us, he was really highly symptomatic. He showed a number of the major symptoms of schizophrenia. He had auditory hallucinations. He heard voices of people who were saying unpleasant things to him.
Coping with voices can be very difficult on the job, with friends, with your family. It's a constant ideas and words and so on going through your head.
I don't think you're ever healed. I don't think one is ever healed any more than you can ever be healed from any catastrophic experience. Jim has improved very dramatically because he is on medication for schizophrenia. Also, he has wonderful support systems.
Well, I want to travel a lot more. A full-time job. A lot more friends and people in my life. Have a family and so on and so forth. That's will happen.
Make the plunge. Kill yourself.
Schizophrenia, once believed to be possession by the devil. Follow the treatment as it progresses from exorcist to psychiatrist. Next on Today's Health.
Textbook examples only occur in textbooks. The toughest challenge for doctors who treat mental illness is making a correct diagnosis. Troubled patients don't always communicate very well, and symptoms often look similar in different cases. Correctly identifying the problem is the first step toward finding the proper treatment.
Recovery or tragedy, the right diagnosis can be the difference between success or more suffering. Mental illness strikes millions of Americans in a complex variety of extremes, levels, and degrees.
We're mainly interested in differentiating schizophrenia from affective disorder, namely manic depressive illness or major depression, and possibly drug abuse.
Although they can sometimes look the same, the therapy and the medication for one psychosis is often quite different than another. That's why identifying the problem correctly remains critical to proper treatment. The American Psychiatric Association lists 5 criteria for a patient to be diagnosed schizophrenic. He or she must have 2 of those criteria for a specific period of time.
Auditory hallucinations, voices, are probably the most prominent symptom of schizophrenia, along with delusions, which are false beliefs like paranoid ideas about television speaking to you and so on.
I started hearing voices when I was about 21 or 22. They talk about the future of the world and things like that.
We also recognize what we call primary negative symptoms, which is the absence of whatever it is about man as a social being that causes patients with this illness to isolate themselves and withdraw.
My relationships started failing, academics failing, athletics failing, etc.
So what we need are more effective treatments that patients are comfortable with, and drugs like clozapine and risperidone and the whole new generation of similar drugs are going to be a big advance in that. And we really need to revitalize our mental health care system. We would not deprive people with epilepsy of drug treatment or other kinds of therapy. We need to take the same attitude toward people with schizophrenia.
If you think someone you love has a mental illness, you're not alone. More than 20% of adults in this country experience some form of mental illness. But there's more help and hope available than ever before. We've come a long way, but there's still far to go. Let's watch.
Call the exorcist. For over 2,000 years, many believed this was the last hope for a mentally ill patient. Good versus evil. A holy man pitted against the devil in an epic struggle for the afflicted one's mind, body, and soul. In the days of the pharaohs, Egyptian shamans performed exorcisms when flogging and starvation wouldn't work. Around 200 BC, a more enlightened approach included pleasant sanatoriums, organized parties, and concerts for the patients. But if that didn't work, bleeding, restraints, and purging soon followed. In the 1800s, humanitarianism re-emerged and the chains disappeared. But it wasn't until the 1950s when the first real breakthrough in treating mental illness allowed patients to leave the institutions and return to the world. Drugs emerged that reflected an understanding of the brain's biology, structure, and mechanisms. But hope came with a price. The first antipsychotic drugs often caused debilitating side effects. Ongoing research continued to delve deeper into the intricacies of the brain and identified an imbalance of two brain chemicals in schizophrenics. In this decade, that learning finally spawned a new generation of antipsychotic medications like risperidone that modify both chemicals. The results can be dramatic in stopping the debilitating symptoms of schizophrenia without triggering side effects. Hopefully, the days of the exorcists, manacles, and straitjackets are long gone, and a more humane future belongs to research, development, and understanding.
Say goodbye to Mother Earth. Do something.
Unrelenting voices, a constant distraction. What are they saying? Visions, delusions, the schizophrenic nightmare. Live it when we return on Today's Health.
It's a national tragedy. All too often, people suffering from schizophrenia end up homeless. You may have seen one in the streets ranting to no one in particular or nearly catatonic. The disease can trigger so much overstimulation inside the brain that the outside world becomes long forgotten. What is going on in their minds? To help us understand, here's a dramatization of the inner turmoil described by several patients.
I started hearing voices when I was about 21 or 22. Some are trying to hurt me. Some are trying to be nice to me.
He doesn't know what to do.
He's such a fool. Life is a carnival. Do you remember that song?
Say goodbye to Mother Earth, Mother Angel.
I want my mother.
Why don't you just kill yourself now?
No.
Yeah, go to the roof, jump like a man, Superman. Yeah, do something right for a change. You are never good at anything.
Come, follow me. You'll be safe here.
Your feelings broadcast every thought in your tiny brain.
It's the favorite show on our planet. There must be some way out of here.
Your stupidity makes us laugh.
Make the plunge. Kill yourself. You're evil. Pure evil.
And they just became full-blown over the course of about a week.
It's a devastating experience for patients when these intrude in their consciousness and they can't keep them out of consciousness long enough to concentrate on other kinds of things.
I hear voices 24 hours a day, even in my sleep. In fact, I'm hearing them right now.
So how to silence the voices? It can be done, but often only with medication. When the drugs stop, the hallucinations, delusions, and other symptoms will most likely begin again. It's often a vicious cycle of release and return to the mental health facilities.
In and out, in and out. The treatment of the schizophrenic patient has traditionally been marked by a revolving door cycle. The ability to self-medicate has allowed many of the patients to leave the hospital and go home. But non-compliance to the treatment has caused many of the symptoms to return, and that's caused many of the patients to return back to the hospital. Dr. Strauss, why is non-compliance such a problem? Why aren't patients taking the medications they need to take?
There are several reasons. All these medications have side effects. People feel them. They're uncomfortable. They can have blurry vision, dry mouth, constipation, drowsiness, low blood pressure, so they get weak when they stand up.
Earlier I mentioned the revolving door. What's being done to break that cycle?
Probably part of the fact that the revolving door is less so now is that our medications are better.
Where does the family fit in the treatment of this disease?
Families are very critical to the treatment of these people. Nothing beats a good supportive family. They provide a tremendous amount of support. The families have to be educated so they understand the disease process, the medications, the importance of following the doctor's instructions on how to take the medications, of supporting the people through a period of side effects if indeed that occurs.
What's your hope for the future? Are you seeing an improvement as far as the treatment of these patients?
We are much better than we were. We have medications now that restore people to a functioning level of life. I have patients who were hallucinating and doing nothing who are now going to school and have jobs. It's wonderful. I wish I could say that it works for everybody. We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
So I was losing touch with reality and I was losing touch with people.
Some call him a patient, others think he's a hero. Schizophrenia once controlled him. Now he's fighting back for himself and others. Meet him when we return on Today's Health.
You've heard the expression, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. That slogan referred to higher education, but could just as easily have applied to the effort to meet the challenge of mental illness. The human brain is still an open and mystifying frontier, but today's explorers, the researchers and scientists, are charting the coordinates on a highway paved with hope.
If this image were a work of art, it might be entitled Hope. But this is no artist's conception of some surreal world. It's an actual image of a living, working human brain taken with positron emission tomography, or a PET scan. High-tech equipment like this has opened the window into a previously hidden world of cortexes, synapses, receptors, neurons, ganglia, and more. The brain, if you put it into perspective of the Milky Way galaxy, there's more neurons, the fundamental building block of the brain, in this structure than there are stars in our Milky Way galaxy.
For people suffering from schizophrenia, the future already looks a lot brighter than ever before. Brain imaging like this has identified two distinct chemicals, dopamine and serotonin, that seem to be out of balance in patients diagnosed as schizophrenic.
The brain has developed the basic building block, which is the neuron. And the neuron has a long wire that comes off and terminates into what is called the synapse. When that electrical activity is mediated down that wire, the neurochemical is released where it can act on other receptor sites. Drugs can interact with that process, can block, can augment, can enhance, can inhibit, can modulate.
No one on Earth can adequately explain brain chemistry in 2 minutes. However, these pictures are worth 1,000 words. They clearly show that schizophrenia and other mental illnesses are biological diseases that may be triggered by uncontrollable forces like genetics, heredity, extreme stress, social and environmental factors, or natural chemical imbalances.
It's my greatest hope that with all of this new information that we're able to gather for the first time, that we will be able to take it into the brain to heal humanity and to heal those groups of diseases that affect our society in the most fundamental way. The serious mental illnesses.
It's possibly the single most destructive disease to young lives today, schizophrenia. But many are fighting back. Drugs can give them new hope, and determination can keep them on the road to recovery. What's life like when you're coping with this affliction? Let's take a look right now.
Kevin Buchberger was first introduced to the nation on the cover of Time magazine. Kevin suffers from schizophrenia, and this is his story.
When I was about 18 or 19, I began to withdraw from my peers. So I was losing touch with reality and I was losing touch with people. But at that point, it still wasn't very bad. I mean, it was going to get much worse. To make an analogy, it was like being on a raft going down the Colorado River and all of a sudden you start to approach the rapids. Or I hear these little children, they were autistic. And I thought that Jesus Christ would come down and put their little spirits in my soul or in my body so that I wouldn't be alone and lose touch, that they were supposed to keep me in touch. I was homeless for about 2 times that I can remember. It's just senseless, insane wandering. I was taking food out of garbage cans. I didn't have any money. I didn't know about feeding shelters at churches. I didn't know about food stamps. So what could I do? Shortly after that, I got arrested. They put me on Haldol. Next thing you know, I'm back in Ohio. And that's how you get off the street. The medication I'm on now doesn't cause me any side effects, but the older neuroleptics like Novain, Prolixin, Haldol, especially Haldol and Novain, really caused lightheadedness, and I mean, you would be literally climbing the walls. I mean, this stuff drove me nuts. The new drug changed my life, and I think things can only get better, you know, as I continue to take the medication. I think there's a lot of room for my improvement yet. But the best there is the fact that, you know, I can be high functioning, you know. I can live on my own. I'm not in an institution. I'm not at home with my folks. I'm going to school, you know. I'm holding a job. You know. My older brother thinks of this as being like my phoenix. You know, I've risen from the flames.
No one can turn back the clock or erase the past. Centuries of torture, mistreatment, and inhumanity towards the mentally ill are just part of our history. But now, we're in a new era of understanding, recovery, and enlightenment. A future full of promise for patients and families suffering from disorders like schizophrenia. I hope this show gave you some new insight into this complex illness. I'm Kathleen Sullivan. Join us again next time as we get right to the heart of the matters concerning your life on Today's Health.
This has been a presentation of 5 Star Productions USA, which is solely responsible for its editorial content.